The twin moons of planet Orion floated like silver lanterns above the royal city of Aurelian, a place of shining towers, blue glass bridges, and floating lights. The people of Orion were called Lyran, tall and graceful beings who lived in harmony with crystal energy. They were known across the galaxy for their strength, intelligence, and strict social order. At the top of their society stood the Alpha King, Theros Valen, ruler of the Lyrian Empire. His voice could command armies. His eyes, golden and cold, could silence a council room. Under his rule, the Empire had conquered 10 star systems and forced weaker races into loyalty. But for all his power, the king carried a wound that could not be healed. His daughter, Princess Elira, had never spoken a single word. She was beautiful like dawn, her hair silver white, her eyes glowing faintly like a crystal star. Yet since her birth, silence followed her like a shadow. The royal healers had tried everything: light therapy, mind bonding, energy resonance. But her lips never made a sound. The king had offered fortunes to anyone who could make her speak. No one succeeded. The royal seers whispered an ancient prophecy: when the silent daughter speaks, the stars will tremble and fate will change. The king hated those words. He ordered the prophecy erased from the royal archives. Still, the whisper spread through the empire like smoke, turning his daughter into a symbol of fear and hope at the same time. The human arrival. A few years passed. Elira grew from a quiet child into a graceful young woman. She moved like light across marble floors, always silent, always watching. The king loved her but hid his frustration behind his stern face. One day a messenger came to the royal court. "Your Majesty," he said, bowing deeply, "the human delegation from Earth has arrived." "They seek audience." The court went silent. The humans were newcomers to the Lyraean sector, small, fragile beings compared to the tall, elegant Lyraean. But they were brave and clever. Their ships, though smaller, carried strange technology that used pure logic instead of crystal energy. The Lyraean Alphas saw humans as an inferior species, but King Theros allowed them to attend the Galactic Council, hoping to keep peace. That evening, a grand banquet was held in the Hall of Starlight. Hundreds of nobles gathered beneath a roof of floating mirrors that reflected the galaxies above. Elira sat beside her father, wearing a soft gown made of luminous silk. She didn't speak, but her gaze was sharp and full of questions. The doors opened and the human ambassadors entered, men and women in dark uniforms, their expressions calm but alert. Among them was Commander Isaac Hale, the leader of Earth's delegation. His hair was dark, his eyes gray, and his face had the quiet strength of someone who had seen war and survived it. He bowed respectfully before the king. "Your Majesty, on behalf of the United Earth Federation, I thank you for your invitation." The king's tone was distant. "We welcome you, human. Speak, then eat. Our food may be too refined for your kind." Isaac smiled slightly. "We humans adapt well, Your Majesty." Several Lyraean nobles chuckled quietly at his words, mocking his courage. Elira, sitting beside her father, looked at Isaac, really looked, and felt something strange. Her heart pulsed faster, and her hand trembled slightly on the table. The silent watchers, the banquet continued. Music filled the hall. Light waves that formed sound without instruments. The nobles spoke of trade routes, star politics, and the Alpha conquests. But Elira's eyes never left the human commander. He did not speak much. He listened, his gaze sharp but calm. When Lyrian generals mocked human weaknesses, he did not react. Instead, he looked at them the way a storm looks at mountains, patient, unbending. Elira tilted her head, studying him. She had seen many proud leaders from different worlds. But this one was different. His presence felt steady, like gravity. Something inside her mind whispered in a language she did not know. Her father noticed her watching and frowned slightly. "Elira," he said quietly, though he knew she could not answer. "Do not let your curiosity shame us." She lowered her eyes in silence. Later, as the banquet ended, King Theros rose. "Our time ends," he declared. "May the stars favor those who serve strength." Isaac bowed again, his voice calm. "And may they protect those who value peace." The hall grew quiet. That simple human response, said without fear, carried more power than any threat. The king's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Elira watched Isaac turn to leave, and then, without understanding why, she stood. The whole court turned in surprise. The silent princess had never stood up during public gatherings unless commanded. The first word, Elira's feet moved on their own. Her heart pounded like thunder. Her father called her name, but she didn't stop. She stepped down from the dais, the sound of her slippers echoing in the vast hall. Every eye followed her. The Lyran guards tensed, unsure what to do. She walked toward the human commander, her eyes locked on his. The room seemed to freeze. The lights dimmed, the air grew heavy with energy. Elira lifted her trembling hand and pointed at him. Her lips parted. The court leaned forward, silent as space, and then, in a soft, fragile voice that none had ever heard before, she spoke. Omega. It was one word, one single breath, but it was enough. The air rippled with energy. The light crystals on the walls flickered and cracked. A faint pulse ran through the palace floor, as if the world itself had heard her. King Theros froze, his golden eyes wide in shock. The nobles gasped. The seers fainted, and Isaac Hale stood still, trying to understand what had just happened. Elira's eyes filled with tears. Her body trembled. She didn't know what she had said or why. The word came from deep inside her soul, something ancient and uncontrollable. Omega, she whispered again, weaker this time. The king rushed to her side and held her shoulders. Elira, my child. You spoke. His voice cracked, his usual strength gone. Say it again, speak. But Elira only shook her head, exhausted. She looked at Isaac again, her eyes glowing faintly, and fainted in her father's arms. The shockwave, the king carried her to the royal healers, shouting orders. Call the high healer. Bring the resonance machines. Keep her breathing steady. In the corner, Isaac was surrounded by guards. Stay where you are, human, one of them said. Do not move. I'm not going anywhere, Isaac replied calmly. But I think you should check your scanners. The guards looked confused, but then the palace alarms began to sound. Energy readings spiked across the system. The royal scientist reported strange data, a pulse of unknown frequency spreading from the hall where Elira spoke. It matched no Lyrian pattern, no known technology. The pulse carried a single coded sequence. When translated, it formed one human word, Omega. The king turned pale when he saw the readings. What does this mean? The high seer bowed, trembling. Your Majesty. The prophecy said the silent daughter's voice would awaken the Omega, the end and the beginning. Silence. Theros roared. No prophecy will control my throne. He turned toward Isaac. You, human. What have you done? Isaac frowned. Nothing, Your Majesty. I only stood there. But deep inside, something stirred in his memory. Years ago, during the human frontier wars, he had heard a strange signal, a whisper that kept repeating through static. Omega awakens when the Silent One speaks. He thought it was just old myth data from lost colonies. Now he wasn't sure. The awakening in her chamber, Elira lay on her bed surrounded by glowing machines. Her breathing was slow but stable. The healer said her energy levels were changing, her body adapting to a new resonance pattern. When she woke, her father was there beside her, eyes red from sleepless worry. He took her hand gently. My child, he whispered, you spoke. After all these years. Tell me, what did you say? What does it mean? Elira blinked slowly. Her lips moved, but only silence came out again. Then she looked toward the window where the night sky shimmered. The stars seemed to pulse faintly, as if answering her heart. The king followed her gaze and saw something strange. The constellation of Orion's crest, usually steady, was changing shape. One star in the center flared bright white, then dimmed into a spiral symbol, the ancient mark of Omega. Impossible, Theros whispered. Elira turned her head slightly, her eyes distant. Inside her mind, she heard a soft voice, not her own. You found him. The voice of the end has begun, she gasped, clutching her chest. Her father called her name again, but she did not answer. The morning after the great banquet, the royal palace of Aurelian did not wake to peace. Instead, it trembled with whispers. Every hall, every guard post, every servant's corner spoke the same shocking words. The silent princess has spoken. From the shining towers to the lower city markets, Lyrans repeated the rumor with awe and fear. She said a word. What word? Omega. Omega? The forbidden one? By the time the suns rose over the crystal domes, the news had already reached the outer colonies. In the streets, people bowed their heads when they said her name. Some believed it was a miracle, others called it a curse. Inside the royal chambers, King Theros stood at the balcony, his golden robe brushing the marble floor. His eyes stared at the horizon, but his thoughts were far away. Behind him, the High Seer and royal advisors waited silently. She spoke one word. Theros said finally, his voice heavy, "Omega." And now the energy fields of my entire world pulse like a dying star. "Explain this to me." The High Seer lowered his head. "Your Majesty, the prophecy." Theros turned sharply. "I said explain, not repeat old ghost stories." The seer swallowed nervously. The resonance sensors recorded a surge in the frequency bands that have been silent since the ancient age. "It matches human patterns." "Human?" Theros's eyes narrowed. "You mean the ambassador she pointed to?" "Yes, Your Majesty." The word Omega seems linked to him. The resonance originated from his position in the hall. The king's jaw tightened. "Bring him to me, at once." The human in the throne hall commander, Isaac Hale, was dragged through the marble corridors by two tall guards. He did not struggle. His wrists were bound with glowing energy bands, but his expression remained calm. He was led into the throne hall again, the same place where the princess had spoken. The shattered crystal lights from the night before still hung from the ceiling. King Theros sat upon his silver throne, eyes sharp like blades. Around him, nobles and generals whispered in the background. Elira was not present. "Human," the king began, his deep voice echoing. "You stand accused of using forbidden technology to control my daughter and disrupt the energy field of Orion." "Speak the truth." Isaac met his gaze steadily. "Your Majesty, I used nothing. I only stood there." "Your daughter looked at me and spoke on her own." Laughter rippled among the nobles. One of the generals sneered. "How convenient. The weak human claims innocence while the heavens shake." Isaac didn't react. "If I had such power, General, I wouldn't be standing in chains." The king raised a hand, silencing everyone. "Enough. Tell me then, what does the word Omega mean in your language?" Isaac hesitated. "It's from an old human alphabet. It means the end. The last." The king's expression darkened. "The end of what?" "I don't know," Isaac said honestly. "But on Earth, it was also used in old stories, to mean the final part of something, but not always death. Sometimes it meant transformation," the court murmured. The High Seer whispered. "The prophecy said when the Silent One speaks, the end begins. The stars tremble because the final voice has awoken." "Enough," the king roared. He stood, his robe flowing like fire. "You speak of prophecies while my daughter lies unconscious. Take him below. Keep him under watch. No one speaks to him without my command." Isaac was taken away again, yet before the guards could lead him out of the throne hall, the great crystal doors opened, and Princess Elira entered. The princess returns. The court went silent as the princess walked in. Her silver gown shimmered like starlight. Though she was pale, her eyes glowed faintly with the same strange light that had filled the hall last night. "Elira," the king said softly, his anger melting for a moment. "You should be resting." She didn't answer. She walked slowly toward the throne, her bare feet barely making a sound. Then she turned her gaze toward Isaac. Her lips trembled. Every person in the hall held their breath, hoping she would speak again. Elira lifted her hand and pointed at the human, just as she had before. "Omega," she whispered. The lights flickered. A deep vibration passed through the air, shaking the marble pillars. The nobles screamed and backed away. The floor cracked with glowing lines of blue energy, spreading outward from Elira's feet. The king ran to her and grabbed her shoulders. "Elira, stop!" But the air itself answered her voice, a soundless hum that seemed to come from the stars. For a brief second, everyone felt something in their minds, an image of two hands reaching across the void, one human, one Lyrian, touching. Then the light vanished, leaving silence. The prophecy awakens. When the glow faded, Elira collapsed into her father's arms. Her breathing was shallow, but her eyes remained open, unfocused. The High Seer fell to his knees. "It has begun." The voice of Omega returns. Theros glared at him. "Do not speak riddles." "What is happening to my daughter?" "The resonance within her blood," the seer said shakily. "It is not purely Lyrian. It carries the ancient pattern, the one our ancestors called the human code." The king froze. "What nonsense is this?" But the seer raised a trembling hand toward Elira. Her energy signature is merging with the human's frequency. The prophecy spoke of this. The silent voice shall awaken the Omega, and the divided shall become one. The king looked down at his daughter, then at the human standing nearby. Rage filled his heart. You mean to say this creature is linked to my child? Not by choice, your majesty, the seer whispered. By destiny. Theros turned to the guards. Take him away. Lock him in the deep cells. If he is the cause, I will find the truth myself. Isaac was dragged out again, though he kept his calm gaze fixed on Elira. For a brief moment, their eyes met, hers filled with confusion and fear, his with quiet understanding. The dream of Elira was placed in a healing chamber surrounded by glowing orbs and humming energy machines. The healers said she was not sick but changing. That night, while the king met with his advisors, Elira dreamed. She saw a dark sky filled with floating lights, stars, but closer, pulsing like living hearts. A voice echoed through the void, gentle and ancient. You have spoken the first word. She turned and saw a shadowy figure shaped like a human. Who are you? She asked in the dream, her voice strong now. The echo, the figure replied. The Omega is not death, Elira. It is the awakening of the first bond, the connection between your kind and mine. She stepped closer. Why me? Because your silence was never emptiness. It was waiting. The universe kept quiet until it heard you. When she reached out to touch the figure, it vanished, and she woke up, gasping, the lights in her chamber flickering wildly. The rising tension by morning, the empire was divided. The Alpha Council demanded answers. Some said the princess was blessed, chosen to lead a new age. Others claimed she was possessed by human corruption. On distant worlds, rebellions began to rise. Omegas, the lowest class of Lyraean, started marching in the streets. They said the prophecy meant freedom. Inside the palace, King Theros grew more desperate. He ordered the scientists to find a cure for his daughter's infection. They ran endless tests, but nothing made sense. Elira's body pulsed with energy frequencies never seen before. Each time she spoke the word Omega, machines overloaded. Still, Elira remained calm. She didn't fear her voice anymore. She knew it meant something greater. The meeting below that evening, she escaped her chamber. The guards tried to stop her, but the energy field around her flickered and passed through the walls like mist. She moved through hidden corridors, following a strange hum in her mind. The hum led her deep below the palace or to the old prisons. There, behind energy bars, sat Isaac Hale. He was sitting quietly on the floor, studying the light pattern of his cell. When he saw her, he stood. Princess, you shouldn't be here. She stepped closer. You heard it too, didn't you? The voice, he nodded slowly. I heard something. A whisper through the static. It called to me since the banquet. It said the same thing, Omega. She took a breath. My people think you cursed me, but I think we are connected somehow. Isaac looked at her carefully. Maybe. The frequencies from your voice, they match the lost human signal from Earth's old colonies. We called it the Omega wave. No one could ever decode it. Elira placed her hand against the energy barrier. The wave isn't just a message, it's a memory. Isaac did the same, their palms separated by the glowing wall. The light flickered, then dissolved. The barrier vanished, they both froze. Elira looked at her hand. I didn't mean to, Isaac smiled softly. You didn't break it. You harmonized with it. Before they could say more, the alarm sounded. Guards were coming. Elira turned quickly. Go with me. I can hide you. Isaac hesitated for a second, then nodded. Together they ran through the lower tunnels of the palace, disappearing into the shadowed halls. The whisper spreads by dawn. The king learned his daughter and the human had escaped. His roar of anger shook the entire city. He sent orders across the empire. Find them both, dead or alive. But outside the capital, something even stranger was happening. Across the stars, energy pulses matching Elira's voice spread like ripples through space. On human colonies light years away, children began hearing faint whispers in their dreams. The Silent One has spoken. And on the dark side of Orion's moon, ancient machines buried for thousands of years began to awaken. Their surfaces glowed with the same symbol that Elira had spoken.